Okay, let's learn where it all began. Profiler, where the whole thing started. And we're going to talk about personology, face reading, body language, micro emotions. So let's see where it all began. So, personology, the reading of facial features. According to personology, which means the logic of the face, in other words, the identification and decoding of personality according to facial features, each character trait is related to a certain facial feature, and a combination of some of those traits will then actually present us with a fuller and a more accurate picture of the human character. Body language influences our life from the day we are born to the day we die. In fact, it dates back to the earliest times when people communicated via body language rather than verbal communication. Body language has been used since prehistoric and even before language. After all, when humans didn't know how to communicate vocally, they had to rely on a non-verbal cues. From the dawn of history, people seem to have always been interested in exploring this fascinating subject of facial features and body language. Let's start with the Jews. According to the Kabbalah, Moses is the father of facial wisdom. In both China and Egypt, they investigated the subject from different angles, but it was the Greeks who introduced the theory of facial features and character traits. So let's go back to the systematic approach to the reading of body language and diagnosis of facial features, which began in the West with the philosopher Empedocles, who lived in Sicily in the 5th century BC. He was followed by Hippocrates, the father of medical science, and also Socrates. The first book was written by Aristotle, who lived in 322 BC, a student of Plato, and it was the basis on which the science of physiognomy was built, which was valid for 2,000 years. We also know that Aristotle's most famous student was Alexander the Great, who used the science of physiognomy to select his commanders and warriors. Some of the Roman empires and commanders also used this science to select officers in their conquest campaigns. After the fall of Roman Empire, Europe sunk into a cultural vacuum, and with this the science of physiognomy. At the same time, there were many others who continued to use the science of physiognomy, like the Arabs. Marco Polo, for example, tells us that Baghdad was an important center for the sciences, including personology, and added that during his visit to the Eastern India, he noticed that there were many experts in the field, that they, Chinese, developed a special method of reading faces. There are many references in the Chinese writing that go back to the 300 BC. Even among the Jews, with the Kabbalah theory, the subject, the wisdom of the face, developed following the fall of Constantinople, 1453, to the Turks. Many Greek immigrants arrived in Italy, who brought with them thousands of writings, and also with the invention of printing, 1454. The writings of Aristotle, Plato, and geniuses began to spread among passionate readers, and from this new theory on the subject of physiognomy began to develop. It was the golden age of Renaissance. In the 16th century, in Italy, many books were written in the field of physiognomy, led by Girolamo Cardano between 1501 and 1576. He was an Italian mathematician, philosopher, and doctor, astrologer, inventor, one of the greatest people of clustering in his time. The science of physiognomy has survived thanks to the Swiss researcher Johann Caspar Lavater between 1741 to 1801, who charmed as an ideal physiognomy with an active imagination, judgment, and incredible analytical skills, renewed the science of physiognomy. By the way, in the 18th century, the science of personology was invented by a Viennese physician, Franz Joseph Gall, who lived between 1758 and 1822, who found the state of development of certain parts of brain that reflect on human behavior. In 1866, the famous criminologist Lombroso began practicing this system with phrenology and physiognomy. Following in-depth research, he recognized in the structure of criminals that some signs are indicating evil in that person. In England, in the 18th century and 19th century, during the reign of the Queen of Elizabeth, reading the face was considered a threat to the authorities, and a punishment was for using the method was whipping.
I have a story for you about Abraham Lincoln choosing his cabinet. Lincoln seated himself behind the mahogany desk and opened his right hand to receive the papers. Letters from generals, teachers about Lieutenant McNeed were handed over. The pile was so high that by the time Lincoln had read them all, the sun was setting. The men were eager to get into their carriages and return home to their wives and dinners. "Well," Lincoln began, "he seems an ideal candidate from these letters. His war record is impeccable, and I can find no fault with anything I have read about this man. Let us meet him now, so we might return to a quiet evening with our families. Bring Lieutenant James McNeed to me, please." The side door opened, and the attending army aide ushered a man in uniform into the room. He came to stand directly in front of Abraham Lincoln. The president's gaze was powerful and searching as he regarded the officer. Lincoln was reviewing McNeed's facial features, a system called face reading, which he had learned when he was a young lawyer. It helped him to accurately read a person's character. In his mind, Lincoln made note of McNeed's features: a dimpled chin that was short, a chin which receded back to tuck behind forward thrusting front teeth, an uneven forehead hairline, a tiny tight mouth, strange ears which protruded out from his head at odd angles, a mouth that upturned like a joker, but McNeed wasn't smiling, and a thick unibrow eyebrow. What was curious about McNeed, Lincoln thought, was that as he answered each direct question, his eyes would shift, almost retract visibly. It seemed to happen when the questions involved his military record. Lincoln had learned to recognize this eye change as cloaking, and he had seen it often in spies of all sorts. The president paced up and down. He made his decision and turned to the group. "Please leave us, Mr. McNeed." And after the man disappeared down the corridor, Lincoln turned to the curious cabinet members and said, "I don't want this man anywhere close to me." Lincoln pounded his open flat hand onto his desk as the astonished group gasped and was reverted to attention. "Show me a man who is 40 who is not responsible for his face." With that, he pulled in his vest and with long strides left the room. Weeks later, a news bulletin emerged from a border state with an artist's rendering of an escaped convict, Walter McNeed, who had been accused for killing his brother, Lieutenant James McNeed, and stealing his military papers. The murdered brother, Lieutenant James McNeed, had been a valiant soldier decorated in battle. And for those who studied the facial drawing closely, the man who had stood before Lincoln had been none other than Walter McNeed.
In the late 1930s, a judge, Edward Vincent Jones, began to correlate personality traits by identifying their physical markers and specific behaviors attached to each trait. Prisoners who appeared in his courtroom found the judge who had already guessed with great accuracy the crime of which they were accused. Soon he began teaching his friends the skill and eventually started classes. In the decades following, Robert L. Whiteside studied and worked with Jones at the Personology Foundation of Los Angeles. In the 50s, Whiteside formed a team of personologists who validated more than 68 basic traits, and they actually got to a very high level of accuracy. Personology is an art. The personologist profile is a comprehensive language for learning about ourselves, yet it goes beyond that. Through it, you can tune into your learning, thinking, expressing, and feeling emotion, values and desires, interests and physical actions needed. It is a documentation of your own trait patterns and their interactions that produced your innate talents and skills. A documentation presented it to you in simple language that will allow you to put this knowledge to use in your own self-unfoldment. The personology profile provides you with self-portrait that has an uncannily accurate. Many people claim that the profile recognizes them entirely. Why is that while we appear to be alike in our anatomy and physiology, we seem different in our temperament and personality? Why do we experience these differences in a full range of emotions, from excitement and love to understanding and collaboration to irritations, conflict and violence? Edward Vincent Jones pioneered the work in the 1920s as he undertook research to create a set of empirical correlations between the body and personality. He began research during his law practice and career as a justice of the peace. The first phase of research occurred from 1920 to 1940. Jones put together a series of empirical correlations from the historical material in Western science, physiognomy, dating back 1800 years to the writing of Aristotle, Galen, Hippocrates. He found considerable information both in Western culture and in the rich physiognomy of medicine in China dating back 3,000 years ago. As a result of his work and research, he received an honorary doctor degree, honorary doctor of medicine from the University of Mexico. In the 1950s, Robert L. Whiteside applied modern statistical methodology to Jones' work, which began the second phase research. Whiteside, personally trained by Jones, also had a formal background in psychology and statistics. Whiteside began with the question, is there validity based on variations in the structural proportions seen in the human's body? He designed an opinion survey utilizing a sample of 1,200 individuals who had previously undergone personological analysis at the San Francisco Personality Foundations. The results indicated that 86% of those surveyed confirmed the description of their personality was accurate. During the periods of 1951 to 55, a third phase of the research began of individual traits, starting with base population of 1,050 adults. Their physiognomy was analyzed by Whiteside and his staff. These correlations validated the finding that the personality can be characterized based on observations of the form and structure of the body or the body's physiognomy. As a result, the significant application of the analysis led to the fourth stage of the research, which began in 1958. William F. Burtis, an industrial and mechanical engineer, joined Whiteside's team of research in another statistical survey. In a long study from 1959 to 71, Plenty Business Association friends made approximately 11,000 individual judgments on the accuracy of a personological evaluation of people they knew. The results of the survey were 81% agreement, 3% disagreement, and 60% undecided. Personology's new language led to the fifth phase of research on the personology analysis, which began in 1980 with Dr. Michael Bider, a physician, Daniel Whiteside, Robert Whiteside's son, Gordon Stokes, William Burtis, and others. The result of that research provided a major overhaul of the language of personology. It is also reflected a general shift in philosophical perspective of the human being from previous 40 years. From 1960 to 1995, nearly 25,000 individuals learning about the service primarily through the word of mouth. The bulk of this work was done by Robert Whiteside, William Burtis, and also including a number of other pioneering colleagues to this group. And if we talk about a new procedure, in 1996, a new team called Jamega Personality Profile Consult, guided by William Burtis, developed a highly effective and new procedure. The new procedure was called the Integrated Personality Profile, TIPP, which represents a dynamic interface between the individual and what he or she needs to do to experience a great sense of fulfillment. How am I connected? I was introduced to Nomi Tickle. Nomi Tickle is a famous, one of the renowned personologists in the world. I was introduced by David Gabriel in 2009, and since that day that David Gabriel analyzed me, I've been studying the topic and I developed software, and I've been teaching, training thousands of people. And today I'm working with the Israeli security and defense forces and special forces. I'm working with universities and business sector in Israel and abroad, and it gives me a great joy, fulfillment of my dream, connecting and making you and everyone understand people better. So I think that I'm giving something great to the universe, and my big will is to have you become and understand people better. So I hope you're enjoying, and let's see what we will learn in this amazing travel to face reading and body language and micro emotions and everything together, how we connect them and build them together to make you a great communicator, a great communicator. Thank you.